Boa tarde. É um grande prazer poder recebê-los mais uma vez aqui no canal, nesta série Solução de Conflitos, para falar sobre elementos teóricos e práticos envolvendo arbitragem, mediação, dispute boards, negociações. Trata-se de um projeto iniciado no canal neste ano, em que podemos receber convidados que compartilharam experiências de pesquisa, experiência de atuações na prática jurídica, na prática da mediação envolvendo os temas debatidos. E hoje, a título de celebração de um primeiro momento, um primeiro marco, uma primeira temporada dessa série Solução de Conflitos, faremos um debate especial, aproveitando um diálogo, inclusive, que é muito caro, muito especial neste canal, que é o diálogo entre direito e arte. Receberemos o professor da Creighton University, nos Estados Unidos, Noam Ebner. Ele é professor do programa de mestrado em negociação e solução de conflitos dessa universidade, nos Estados Unidos, a Creighton University, e tem desenvolvido projetos relacionados ao treinamento de professores e estudantes em matéria de solução de conflitos, e tem desenvolvido muito especialmente nos últimos anos um projeto voltado aos diálogos entre Star Wars e a solução de conflitos. Então, é um grande prazer receber aqui o professor Noam Ebner. Welcome, Professor. I was just introducing you, and it's very nice to have you here to celebrate this end of the year in which we have been discussing practical and theoretical aspects of conflict resolution. And it's a very special moment that in which we are able to discuss the relations, the connections between conflict resolution, which is a very important issue in law and legal education and legal practice nowadays, and a very important cultural legacy of our time, of our era, which is the Star Wars saga. I think that everybody in the audience knows Star Wars, and I think that the studies of the connections between law and cultural manifestations and pop culture and art are very relevant for us to develop empathy and understand the timeless lessons. So it's very nice to have you here, Professor. Thank you very much. And I thought that we could start with your explaining how did you get into this field, this area of conflict resolution.
What am I doing here, right? How did I get here? Hi, everybody. And Enrique, thank you so much. And a part of me said, well, you just basically said it all yourself, so we can just wrap it up and move on. It is a celebration, and conflict resolution is such a huge topic. And what better way to talk about it than Star Wars? So that's the synopsis of what we can talk about today. My own path didn't start out. I started off on a desert planet, but it wasn't Tatooine. Like many people entering the conflict world, I took a roundabout path. I originally went to law school to save the world, like so many people go to law school. By the end of the third year in law school, I was going to be a medical malpractice shark. Like so many people make that switch in law school. I'm sure you're familiar with it. You go in with the best of intentions, and then by sort of sometime in their second year or maybe a little further along, they're looking for their job in the corporate sector or the insurance sector or whatever it is. And then really by chance or fate or, the prophecy, whatever it is, I was walking down. You asked me sort of, how did you get into this? Well, by chance. I was walking down the hall towards property law, which is one of the most, it's of all of the doctrinal courses, it's the most doctrinal of all the doctrinal courses. And heading down a long corridor towards there, when suddenly someone popped out of a side door, a side classroom, and grabbed me. And it was a friend of mine. He said, hey, Noam, they're opening up another section of mediation. but only if they have 10 students in the room. And I poke my head inside the room and I count, and of course there are 9 people in there. So he dragged me in there, and luckily this was just before computerized systems in universities would have made this kind of thing impossible, because I was in property law. And he dragged me in there, and I stayed in there, and really that is in some sense that's the end of the story. I mean, I did go on, of course, to finish that law degree and another law degree, and I took the bar and I practiced as an attorney when I needed to pay the rent. But from that moment on, I was deeply involved in the world of conflict resolution until today. Sorry, Enrique, you're on mute. And it's so interesting that I get to say it this time, because usually it's me.
So what I was saying is that when you speak of conflict resolution, I mean, is that a specific field that in the United States you are already studying, or is just an umbrella concept that involves a different methods, different mechanisms?
Well, so it's a lot of things to a lot of people, as your question hints. And for me, my first inroad was a mediation course that I took. I was living in Israel at the time. Israel is a conflict-immersed country. It's a conflict-rife society. So there is a lot of conflict work ongoing there. Even before you get into the legal frameworks of how things are resolved. There are all sorts of efforts, from top-level diplomatic efforts to grassroots efforts, contact groups, Israelis and Palestinians, Muslims and Jews, and all sorts of activities of that sort. And that was one area of activity that I sort of bounced around in for a while, figuring out how these tools that I learned in a mediation course in the context of a law school, how can they be applied in these other fields? At the same time, mediation as a dispute resolution process, both inside and outside of the legal system, was also developing in Israel. And I sort of jumped into that and did everything I can. There wasn't such a profession then as a mediator, or you could say the name of the profession, but nobody knew what it meant. And with a lot of, public activity and explanation and pitching yourself to companies and organizations and bar associations, and, sort of carving out an area of activity alongside others who were doing the same thing at the same time. I was part of a wave. To sort of professionalize the area specifically of mediation, interpersonal mediation in Israel. And that was another aspect of what I was doing. I was also really interested in negotiation. And negotiation then, it wasn't taught anywhere. If it was taught at all, it was sort of a subsection of a mediation course, because negotiation is something that you do in mediation, but the actual study and practice as negotiation as a profession wasn't something that was discussed much. And a little after this initial period, I started focusing on that and started dealing in negotiation representation, negotiation coaching, negotiation training. So your answer, like, what did you do, or what does conflict resolution mean to you? It's a large mix. It is an umbrella. As time went by, I started to realize, that there's an even larger world of conflict resolution out there, even beyond the patchwork that I had been working on putting together. I started teaching at different places around the world, and sort of everywhere I roamed, contributed to my knowledge and understanding about the different aspects of conflict resolution, and also the different applications of it across countries, across contexts, across cultures. I taught in Turkey for several years. I taught in Costa Rica for several years. Did work in the United States, in Israel, and sort of another, shorter term world in different places. And mainly I took time, particularly when I was traveling, and I had a growing family then. So when I was traveling was the time that I could immerse myself in learning in projects. And in those periods, I learned both different regions and also sort of dived into the broader area of international conflict resolution, which I never practiced deeply or any much more than a training here and there and a consultation here and there, but sort of just adding everything into the bag as I went along.
And how did you came up with the idea of studying these different kinds of conflict resolution, these different methods within the analysis, or beginning with the analysis of a cultural reference, a pop cultural reference, as Star Wars is?
Well, it's both. The short answer is more or less the moment I started learning this, I said to myself, boy, I want to write a book about conflict resolution in Star Wars. This was in year one of learning mediation, like the application of this, and that seemed like a really cool and fun thing to do. Thankfully, I didn't do it back then. One of the reasons, thankfully, is because I know much more now than I did then. Also because I would have been doing it on my own and not with the partner that I have working with me right now, Jen Reynolds from University of Oregon School of Law, and the partnership and the backing of DRI Press at Hamlin Mitchell and Mitchell Hamlin School of Law, a press focused on conflict resolution, who is a wonderful partner in this. So those are reasons in themselves that I'm really glad that there was this 20-year gap. Not to mention we have more to work with now, but really. Back then, I would have done it because it would have been fun and cool. And now I'm doing it for different motivations. Sure, it is fun and cool. And if you asked me, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, what do you want to be when you grow up? And, I wouldn't have even thought to say, oh, I want to write books about Star Wars and anything, and thought that, oh, I could live my life doing that. But here I am. And I think that that's pretty cool. But the real motivation is this. And it touches back on what you started with before, that the notion, the topic of conflict resolution is just becoming ever more urgent for everything. And we have people listening in, I'm sure, from around the world, and everyone can think of their own place, their own locale, and say, "Oh yeah, especially for us, right? We need that." And the truth is that we all need that on international, national, societal, and interpersonal and personal levels. And something that I've oriented a lot of my work into over nearly a decade by now is trying to bring to fruition the reason that I got into this in the first place. And that is that as soon as I started working, just like anybody who takes a good mediation course or a good conflict resolution course, they say, everybody should know this stuff. Like, why am I learning this? Why didn't I learn this before? Why am I only learning this now at age, 25 in law school? Why didn't I learn this in first grade? And if I'm learning this in law school, but why isn't, the woman over there who's studying philosophy, or the guy over there who's studying literature, or the chemist, or the business person, or right? Why aren't they learning this stuff? And that's always been part of my motivation and my passion. And for the past, as I said, around 10 years, I've been trying to set up different projects that would allow me to do that kind of teach the world kind of. And Star Wars is a very special way of doing that. First of all, it's really fun. So there, but the point is that it won't only be fun for me. It'll be fun for everyone, I hope. And what happened was that I was speaking with Jen Reynolds, my co-author, co-editor, and we were discussing, how different ways in which we could each bring our different motivations to work together. I have my Teach the World motivation, and she has that as well, and she has others. She is an expert on pop culture, far more in a far more broad sense than I am, and also what it means about us. I'm more of a shallow, hey, look, those are cool laser blasts, and they're fighting. Let's think about that. It seemed to us as we spoke that we were speaking of this broader notion that, when we teach a class, even a really large class of mediation or negotiation, so what? So we have 20, 30, 50, 100 students in a room. And that's great, but that's not going to teach the world. I mean, I love teaching, but that is not going to change the world. We hope that they'll amplify the message outwards and that they will practice. I mean, that's the reason we teach. But that's not going to teach the world. And knowing we were limited in that sense in terms of audience, we're trying to think of how we could get a bigger audience. And the idea of harnessing conflict resolution to the wagon or the engine of pop culture seemed to us to be a really good solution to that. Pop culture is something, any pop culture artifact, element, movie, book, series, sitcom, whatever it is, has hundreds of thousands or hundreds of millions of followers, of endorsers, of likers, of enjoyers. And if there were some way to kind of piggyback on that, to catch a ride on that, to let the pop culture artifact open the door into those people's hearts and minds through which we could offer some conflict resolution knowledge, skills, and understanding, even just a bit, then we'd be able to work teaching the world at a scale that the field has never been able to do so far. Okay, and that's so that's sort of how we got thinking about, okay, and then it was just a matter of choosing a pop culture artifact.
Great. So it's not just a matter of identifying the notions that are present in these or that scene of Star Wars, but it's rather about using those references, those plots, to teach people how to better understand or better use negotiation techniques and mediation skills in their lives.
Right. So that's in a nutshell, sort of the essence of the book. I'll add on one more bit. So then, once we've opened the door, and we're hoping, we discussed a lot of ideas of what this should be, this project, and we came around of let's start with a book and see what happens. Because you can think of so many other media through which you could connect the two. So we decided to work together on a book that would connect, that it would work through two mechanisms. One is that it would teach people who enjoy Star Wars something about conflict resolution that they hadn't known before. And on the flip side, one of the ways it would do that, or the way it would open the door for people to listen, and be willing to learn, is along the way to also teach people something they hadn't known about Star Wars before. And it's not as if I'm any more of a Star Wars genius than 1,000 people on the internet who know far more than me. But the idea is that knowing Star Wars very well, as Jen and I do, and also having this frame of conflict resolution, we'll be able to explain dynamics, plot twists, narratives, character developments in Star Wars in a way that will make Star Wars fans who have not yet been exposed to this say, oh, wow, okay, so that's why that happened, or now I see this in a new way. They're not trying to preach like, we know Star Wars, or we're going to teach it to you, or to sort of smush their Star Wars enjoyment and say, we're going to steal this from you and teach you stuff with it. No, it's more of a sort of a dynamic two-way street. We're gonna show you that we get this, and along the way, let this in, and that way you'll learn both about Star Wars and about conflict. But we also realize that that one key to that is not doing that on our own. We need a lot of a lot of different voices. Not everybody's going to want to listen to my voice. You're very kind, Enrique. You're letting me speak, and you even brought people together to listen to me speak. But some people, like my kids, after I've spoken for a couple of minutes, they shut down or, put the video on 1.5 speed. That's what my kids tell me I sound best on. So not everybody's necessarily going to connect to our style or our outlook on and also there are so many viewpoints on stars, and one of the beauty is that it belongs to everyone. And this is one of the reasons to choose Star Wars over, some other really great pop culture phenomena, is not only our own personal, we grew up with it, but also Star Wars really is, it's owned individually by so many people. So many people have personally sort of grown up with it or lived with it and developed their own personal thoughts and narratives and have been sort of a partner to to George Lucas or whoever followed George Lucas in creating this. So we called together a cast of other academics and professionals in the Star Wars field, I wish, in the conflict resolution field, but not only limited, to a very narrow, let's say, law school dispute resolution or international conflict resolution fields, but really casting a broad net across all of the fields that inform conflict resolution. So in addition to those two, there's management and psychology and social psychology and economics and social work. There's so many other fields that inform this kind of work. And we cast this net and we were wondering, who's a hidden nerd? Let's see who's willing to come. And it was amazing. We just received so many fascinating proposals. Dozens of proposals who wanted to be a part of this. And the hardest part of all that was, the hardest part of working on the book so far was choosing. And in the end, we made some, I won't say hard decisions because we didn't reject anything. We just said, this book will be this. And then there are, several dozen for the next project. So right now we're working on about 18 chapters that have been submitted, and each one takes on a different aspect and it's written in a different voice. We asked people to propose their own topics. We didn't say like, okay, we need a chapter on this, a chapter on that. No, let's see how people connect conflict and Star Wars through their own expertise and then tell it in their own voice. And I got to say, it was so far just reading through the chapters as an editor, and we're just at that stage of editing, like the first round of editing, first submissions. It is delightful. It's 1,000 times better than I could have imagined.
That's wonderful to hear. Yeah. And it's very interesting when you say that each person might have a different interpretation of a specific scene or a specific character. And that's actually what art is about, what this cultural initiatives, what this pop cultural references are about. Each person brings to their lives a different interpretation, a different aspect. And speaking of these interpretations, I'd like to take a chance to hear you about some scenes that took your attention more specifically, and which plots, which characters you think are could teach us these skills. But first, let me take a chance to thank our audience, especially those who have cheered in the chat. Jennifer Reynolds, Moshe Ebner, A. Bernstein, and Funda Aytekin. They're from Turkey, Samaria, Sharon, and they're all welcome here. Thank you very much for your audience, for your participation. Please feel free to ask questions, to bring your contribution to the debate. I think I speak for both of us to give to also open this space for them. And Noam, you have the floor.
I'm so glad the moment you said, well, what scene would you like to talk about? So, 80,000 scenes from all across the saga rushed
Well, the studios don't help because they keep producing. I just learned that Disney is about to release a different series about Boba Fett.
Yeah.
And they're going to be like other books that you're going to have about this.
Yeah. You know, two things about that. One is one of the reasons that Jen Reynolds, she's on the chat. Hi, Jen. One of the reasons that we chose Star Wars, again, it's not only because we love it, it's because it has this multi-generational aspect to it. You know, I loved it the first time my father took me to see A New Hope when I was 4. But I also watch it with my kids now. And I also, you know, showed one of the later movies. I told my father, you need to see this. It connects to you. So, my father probably would never have seen Rogue One a few years ago. In his 70s, he wouldn't have gone to the movie theater to see Rogue One. But I sat him down and I said, I think it's important for you to watch it, and I want to talk with you about it afterwards. So there's that multi-gener, and it's only becoming stickier as Disney continues. And while you can say Star Wars fans love to debate, so part of the is this good? Is this not good? Is this the real thing? Is this not? Well, it's fine by me, and it's creating more conflict to look at as things go by. So that's wonderful. And what we decided for the book is only to include the movies, and the reason was because we wanted these to be things that everybody who's a bit of a Star Wars fan can read and find something in. And the moment you start going into the expanded universe, the off-canon, the canon, the lore, you're going to lose a lot of people and make people say, like, there are all these characters here whose names I don't know. And then we lose the audience. And since our idea was the broad audience, so we decided we're going to stick with the movies. And I know not everybody has seen all the movies, and that's cool. But sort of anybody reading through the book who has seen the trilogy of their time, they'll recognize the names often enough in order to find a chapter or 4 or all of them that they'll feel at home in. So for that reason, we're, in another sense, we're also just preparing the material for ongoing projects. Like, there's so much to talk about The Mandalorian, and I'm sure there'll be so much to talk about the Book of Boba Fett, but they're not a part of this project, so that leaves us for the future. When the scene that rushed to mind first, when you asked about like what scene, the scene that rushed to mind first was probably the most iconic Star Wars scene, the scene in which it all happened, in which the big twist came along, the big reveal, the "No, I am your father" scene. Right? I mean, until then it was people shooting at each other with blasters, and there were lightsabers, and it was cool. But other than being a very basic sort of, and I don't mean to put this down in any way, I was enthralled by A New Hope just as much as anyone. But the thing that sort of added sophistication and depth into this was that reveal. And that scene is really fascinating from a conflict perspective, because you have this kid who rushed into combat unprepared, against the advice of his teachers. He did it for noble reasons, for, reckless, noble reasons. Right decision, wrong decision, doesn't matter. But he's clearly not prepared to fight Darth Vader, who is both so much more experienced and skilled at combat, and also who, chose the playing field and prepared everything. And so here we have this young kid. He rushes into combat, and of course, very soon he loses and he's vanquished. He's on the ropes, right? Or it's Star Wars, so he's on a catwalk, and he's been disarmed, literally, figuratively, and it's all over. And at that moment, where you think that from a conflict perspective, this is where, okay, so we saw. We saw the value of preparation. We see the value of choosing your battles. You see the value of, the value of understanding power and what to do with it. So there's a clear power imbalance. And it's not the kind you want to walk into unprepared. Luke did, and he's about to pay the price. And at that moment, everything changed, because what happened is that Darth Vader began to negotiate with Luke. And watching it from a conflict perspective and a negotiation perspective, it's remarkable. All of a sudden, instead of Darth Vader being the person who has all the answers and all the power and the only one with with a lightsaber, all of a sudden he's asking Luke to join him. And when he's saying he wants Luke to join him, he's essentially saying, look, there's something that I want, and I can't achieve it on my own. In other words, we've moved here from a conflict in which each party thinks that they can achieve things unilaterally. I can vanquish you and kill you or take you prisoner or whatever. I can do that on my own. All of a sudden, we have this situation of interdependence. So Luke needs Darth Vader in order to keep him alive, essentially, at this point. And Vader needs Luke for his for this new, larger purpose that he suddenly introduced. This purpose of, join me and we'll rule the galaxy together as father and son. So there's this brand new interest that's been introduced into this situation between them. We didn't know that Vader had any aspirations for any of that. We didn't know that he had aspirations to rule the galaxy, and we didn't know, remember, this was the prequels had not yet come out. We didn't know that he aspired to rule the galaxy, and we didn't know that he aspired to be a father. But all of a sudden, he's putting both of those on the table, and also offering them to Luke. And that is such a shift that we often see in the real world as well, right? So we're involved in this fight with other people, and either because third parties help us to see that actually we're interdependent and that we need each other, or because we suddenly realize it in our own, on our own. There's this moment in which we say, okay, so what do we need from this person that we can't get by ourselves, and how are we supposed to act in order to get it? And what's particularly interesting here is that what Darth Vader started doing is he didn't start threatening Luke. He didn't use power over, as we say in sort of power analysis. He didn't hold the lightsaber to Luke's throat and say, I'm going to kill you if you don't. He didn't, he didn't chop off Luke's other arm, taking Star Wars to a new level. Instead, he offered him, he said, rule together with me. He offered him the galaxy. So he was trying to speak in a way that would speak to Luke's interests, in a way that would satisfy Luke, in a way that Luke would, well, I'm not only going to get out of this with my life, but I'm also going to rise to some exalted position. Maybe this is where this strange twist in my life that's happened over the past two movies, maybe it was all leading to this point. And he was hoping that Luke would say, okay, or even, okay, Dad, and say yes. So this twist in the plot, which is, from as cinematic analysis, it's brilliant in its own self. But when you add on the conflict analysis and the negotiation level, you suddenly see the whole thing differently, including understanding why Luke said no. And Luke said no because even though the offer to rule the galaxy is, it's pretty persuasive, and Luke has been looking for connection and perhaps for a father his whole life. That's pretty clear from the character development. But Vader's offer didn't speak to Luke's interests. And in the conflict resolution and the negotiation world, we look a lot at interests and sort of the real motivations for which we come to the table. What need are we here to satisfy? What interest are we trying to provide for? And you could, offer Luke everything in the world, but if you didn't satisfy his interests, then he wasn't going to accept. And Luke really didn't have an interest in galactic domination. He didn't have an interest, at this point at least, in a familial connection with this evil being, or this being who he was used to perceiving as evil. And he didn't want any of that. He wanted to save his friends. He wanted to advance the rebels' cause. He wanted to become a Jedi. And he realized that joining Vader would lead him away from all that. And since the deal on the offer on the table didn't match his interests, he said no. So the negotiation analysis really lends to the understanding of the scene. Another aspect of negotiation analysis that really helps here is that you might think that, Vader thought that Luke had no choice but to say yes. I'm not only offering him a dream job, I'm also holding a lightsaber. I mean, I'm the only one with a lightsaber here, and he's stuck out on that catwalk with no way out. He either says yes, or he both ends up with nothing and dies. So he's clearly going to say no. So what Vader did is he did an alternatives analysis. Alternatives meaning what will happen to me if Luke says no, and what will happen to Luke if Luke says no. And he did that analysis for Luke, and he realized that Luke has no good alternative. In negotiation terms, we talk about Luke had no BATNA. He had no best alternative to a negotiated agreement. If he says no, he's going to die. That's an unlikely alternative someone was going to take. So he's definitely going to say yes to me. And he didn't realize that from Luke's point of view, that was actually a valuable alternative. And that he was actually willing to walk away, or in this case, drop away from the deal in pursuit of that alternative, saying the alternative of taking the risk or actually dying is better than becoming this thing that I don't want to be. And he weighed the offer with his interests and the offer with his alternatives, and it was a no-go. And we, just as we do the same when we're buying a car or considering a job, we do that same analysis and either say yes or let go. So this is just an example. I went on about it. I can go on about just about any scene in Star Wars like this. It's a problem for those spending time with me. But adding this layer of negotiation analysis over the Star Wars analysis, I think it has something to offer Star Wars fans that they didn't necessarily had before. I know I didn't have this understanding of Star Wars until I really started looking at it through this frame.
That's actually very interesting to hear, Professor Noam, because this is basically the Skywalker saga speaking. I mean, the fact that all the values of Star Wars, all the plots are connected to this moment that you mentioned, which is I think it's on the second movie of the original trilogy, and actually. It was very interesting to understand how many questions might arise from this one scene. So I will thank again the audience and invite them to send any contributions that they have. I would, but I just now realized that we're on time, the time frame that we were discussing before, and I'm actually very surprised because I didn't notice the time passing. So, but I think that it's up to me to thank you again for being here, and hope that we can have you here again sometime soon. To discuss different aspects. I also extend the invitation to all the other members of the project, especially Professor Jennifer Reynolds, who honored us today with her presence. And feel free to send a final message to our audience, and please share any information that you already have, perhaps about the possible launch of the book, so we can keep track on this and read about it as time arrives.
Well, thank you so much, Enrique, and it's been such a pleasure. And I promise I will let you know the book will be out by the end of next year. is our plan. We don't know exactly when by the end of next year, but definitely by it. It's coming out, as I said, from DRI Press at Mitchell Hamlin University. And I'll share the word, of course. Any of you viewers, you're very welcome to follow me on Facebook or Twitter, where I will announce it. We'll be working on the project's social media as soon as we get through this sort of first editing, first draft, and have time to spend on that. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, thank you very much again, and I wish everybody a nice holidays, and I hope that we're able to get back to new discussions about conflict resolution next year. So, Professor Noam, it was very nice. It was wonderful to have you here. Thank you very much. Bye bye.
Anytime. Bye bye.